I think of it as like messer. So you can see like I bolded like the beginning of these five parts. MESSR. I think of it as messer. So that's the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and rectum. And these are the 5 parts of the digestive system that food directly goes into. So the food directly goes into your mouth, directly down your esophagus, and then directly in your stomach, and then out through the small intestine, and then out through your rectum. And the rest of the digestive system organs, so like you might have heard of like your gallbladder, pancreas, all that other stuff. They're just additional parts. Food doesn't directly go into them, but they act as accessory organs. They help. They also help with digestion. You know, they're very essential. Um, just because their food doesn't go directly in them doesn't mean that they're not important, but they're kind of just there to help out these 5 parts. So the 6 basic activities of the digestive system goes as follows. So the first main job it does is ingestion, which is taking food into the mouth. So whenever you're hungry or whenever you are eating a meal, you put food in your mouth, and that's ingestion. The next is secretion, which is the release of water, enzymes, acids, and buffers into the GI tract. And the GI tract we'll get more into in later slides. That's the gastrointestinal tract. And then third is peristalsis, which is the alternating contraction and relaxation of the muscular wall of the GI tract that propel food towards the anus. So peristalsis is kind of like you eat food and then your whole GI tract, which is the kind of path the food takes through your digestive system, it kind of it has a muscular wall, so it kind of contracts and then relaxes to kind of force food down and keep the food moving, because without this contraction and relaxation, the food wouldn't really go anywhere and it's just going to be stuck in one place, and that's not very good at all. Fourth is digestion, probably the most obvious one, which is the chemical and mechanical breakdown of food particles. So mechanical digestion is the physical, like the actual grinding and churning of food into smaller pieces. And chemical digestion is enzymes in your stomach and your digestive system that break down the nutrients into simpler or smaller forms. So I think the way I kind of remember this is mechanical. It's like kind of physical. Like you can kind of memorize it as it's actually like grinding and churning your food, and then chemicals like more of the more complex things like enzymes breaking down nutrients chemically, so not physically. And then 5 is absorption. So nutrients leaving the GI tract and entering the blood or lymph. And that's when your body or your digestive system absorbs the nutrients for you, and it goes into your blood, which circulates throughout your body, so your whole body gets the nutrients. And your gastrointestinal tract, like I discussed earlier, it's a tube that starts at your mouth and extends to the anus. So it's like the whole pathway the food takes towards the body. It's a very long kind of tube. And then last is egestion, which is the elimination of undigested and indigestible food through the anus. So also known as defecation, or, bowel movements, stools, all that. So that's like the kind of starts at ingestion, which is taking food in the mouth, and ends with egestion. All right, so organs in the GI tract. So first we're going to focus on the mouth. Mechanical digestion, like I just discussed, it's well, in the mouth, not in the stomach. In the mouth, it's like teeth chewing, the physical grinding. It increases the surface area of the food. So if you think about it, if you eat, let's say like a burger, and you bite a piece off, and you just chew it, the surface area gets bigger. You're mushing it into smaller pieces, which is increasing the surface area of the food, kind of making it flatter or more condensed. And then chemical digestion in the mouth is when you have enzymes in your mouth and your saliva, something called amylase. And this enzyme amylase digests starch into disaccharides, which is a type of simple sugar. It's basically the breakdown from starch to sugar, which helps, just it's like kind of like the first step in digestion. It happens in your mouth with your saliva and the enzymes in it. And then your tongue is there to help swallow food, so it plays a pretty important role. And then there's something called the bolus, which helps moisten your food mass to make it go down your esophagus easier. Sometimes if you eat too fast or you don't chew thoroughly, it can be really, really hard to you can kind of feel it going down your esophagus, your GI tract. You just kind of feel it in your chest or throat, and it's very uncomfortable. So always make sure to use your teeth and like chew it. So here's just a picture. So if it goes in the mouth, that's your tongue right here, and then it just goes and you swallow, and then it kind of goes down the tract and into the esophagus, which is the next step. So next we have the pharynx, which is basically the throat, the scientific word for throat. And there's something called the epiglottis in the pharynx, and it's a flap. It's a little muscular flap that prevents food from entering the trachea, which is part of the respiratory system. You might know the trachea as, it's kind of like, I think trachea as like you're breathing, and the epiglottis prevents the food from entering that. So you have kind of like, you want to avoid it going into your larynx, which is right here, your voice box, because that's what makes you choke. You might sometimes, the expression like, oh, I went down the wrong tube, or like when you drink or eat something and then you start choking, that probably means that it went down the wrong tube. And the epiglottis is there to prevent that, but sometimes, there's a little kinks in the system and it kind of doesn't work, but it's there to prevent you from choking, prevent you from getting food into your trachea or in your lungs, which is obviously very bad. Next, we have your esophagus, which is a long involuntary muscular tube leading to stomach. And if you recall, involuntary means that you have really no control over it. It's not like you can make your esophagus move. It's completely not under your control. You can't move it yourself. And it's kind of like the thing I talked about with the peristalsis. It kind of contracts and relaxes to like force food down to the stomach. There's actually no digestion occurring here, unlike the mouth and the stomach. There's no, enzymes or chemicals to, break it down. There's nothing that could break it down in the esophagus. And again, peristalsis mostly occurs in the esophagus, which is alternating wave contractions of the muscular wall pushing food along the esophagus. And so let's go to the picture. So in through the mouth, and it goes down and down, and then we have it's supposed to go down this tube, as you can see here, and you can see the epiglottis right here in your larynx and your trachea. So the esophagus tube and the trachea tube, I guess that's why I call it tubes. You can see they're very close together. So, it's not super uncommon to, maybe choke on something you're eating or choke on something you're drinking even. Next in the GI tract is the stomach, probably the most well-known, and it's a thick-walled muscular sac which temporarily stores food, and it sits on the left side of your upper abdomen and it covers your lower ribs. So I think a common misconception is, well, at least when I was little, I thought the stomach was like near your belly button. It's actually a lot more upward than that. It's also on your left side, so it's like not smack in the middle. It's kind of shaped like this, so it kind of just rests on the left side, as you can see in the picture. Yeah, it's a lot higher than you think, and water passes through the stomach in less than 20 minutes actually, and food passes through within 2 to 6 hours. So anywhere from that time frame, your stomach is digesting stuff and it will leave within 2 to 6 hours. That's why kind of meals, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner are kind of spaced 2 to 6 hours, because once your stomach is empty, you're hungry. And there's two sphincters in the stomach. So sphincters are basically kind of like these muscular, I don't know how to explain them, but they're muscular kind of things that allow things to go through, but then kind of stop it when they're not supposed to go through. I don't know really how to explain it. So there's something called the cardiac sphincter, which is oh, valve. I should probably describe it as kind of like a valve and like in the heart muscle. So it's kind of like a valve separating the esophagus from the stomach. So if this is your esophagus, the long tubey thing you see in the picture, the cardiac sphincter, oh, also it's also called the esophageal sphincter. We kind of think of it either. It's this sphincter right here. Just remember it's the upper one located near the upper stomach. And then there's the pyloric sphincter, which is the valve separating your stomach and your small intestine. The pyloric is always going to be the lower one, and then the esophageal or cardiac one is the upper one. So there's two sphincters to kind of let food in and then kind of let food out. So in the stomach, there's also two kinds of digestion. So there's also mechanical digestion, and that's the peristaltic churning of gastric juices from stomach lining, rugae, which rugae in the stomach is basically folds in the stomach wall. It's a fancy word for kind of these folds you have in your stomach. You know, it's your stomach like in the inside, it's not smooth at all. It's pretty rough actually. That's the physical churning of gastric juices, which is kind of like all the natural juices you have in your stomach to kind of break food down. And then you have chemical digestion, which are also gastric juices, but these contain enzymes and hydrochloric acid, which is chemical term is HCl. And the hydrochloric acid, you might know it's a super strong acid. You shouldn't touch it, you know, without gloves or some kind of protection. It's very, very dangerous. It has like a pH of like 1 to 2, which is very, very acidic. And this hydrochloric acid helps break down food. And that's how your food like really, really breaks down from like chunks into like more of a liquid, which kind of sounds kind of gross. So there's an enzyme called pepsin, which also helps digest proteins, and lipase digests fat. So you got pepsin, which digests proteins, and lipase, which digests fat. And hydrochloric acid also acid dissolves minerals and kills bacteria. So there's multiple functions for hydrochloric acid. It's very important in your stomach. And in chemical digestion in your stomach, it's mainly protein digestion. So it's really trying to break down the proteins and the fat and the like the littler molecules. You kind of break down most of the big stuff in your mouth when you're chewing. So there's actually 3 glands found within your stomach lining, which is kind of the tissue that lines your stomach. So there's mucous neck cells, which secrete mucus to help, you know, with liquid gastric juices, kind of secretes that for like lubrication and all of that. And you got chief cells, which secrete enzymes that break down proteins and lipids. So the chief cells are producing the pepsin and the lipase. And then you have parietal cells, which secretes hydrochloric acid. It also secretes water, you know, alcohol, glucose, aspirin directly into the liver, which helps. If you don't know, liver is the main thing that helps break down and like remove alcohol from your system. So you know, alcoholics, they usually have a really weak liver, and mostly have to get, you know, a liver transplant. There's something called chyme, which is when your food mass. So you know, if you eat a burger and you swallow it in your stomach, chyme is the process of turning that food mass into thin, soupy liquid. So it's like everything's pretty liquid in your stomach by now because because of the hydrochloric acid. It's very strong, also because of the enzymes and all of that. Next, we're going to the small intestine. So as you can see, this is the stomach, and then it moves through the pyloric sphincter into the small intestine. It's a thin, long coiled, narrow tube. It's about actually 20 feet long. You know, it's kind of like really bunched in there. So it doesn't seem that long, but in reality, if you were to kind of lay it all out, it's extremely long. It's very, you know, as you can see, it's very, you know, long and thin, coiled, you can see. Materials move through by peristalsis. So that's the, you know, as I said before, the contraction and relaxation. So it kind of the intestines are smooth muscle. So they're involuntary control, and they just kind of move through by peristalsis, and that's how it moves through. Without peristalsis, it would just kind of sit there. The small intestine also sits in the center of your abdomen. So while the stomach is more on the left side, the small intestine is like more downwards and it covers like a lot more area than the stomach does. So there's three parts of the small intestine. There's the duodenum, which is the part closest to the stomach. So duodenum is like this first chunk, like it's the first kind of part of it's like, if you think of it in thirds, it's the first third of the small intestine. Then you have the jejunum, which is the middle region. It's kind of like the bigger chunk, like the second third. And then we have the ileum, which is the final portion, and it's the most bottom half one. It's the last third, if you want to think of it like that. There's two main functions of the small intestine. First, it's something called final digestion. All nutrients, which final digestion means that all nutrients are digested and broken down into the most basic building blocks. So in the stomach, the pepsin and the ligase kind of digest most of the nutrients and all the fat and proteins, but the small intestine, it's like the final one. It's kind of like the final digestion, like the last step. It's kind of like anything that isn't digestion is just feces, you know? And then the second is absorption. So nutrients enter the bloodstream through folded walls of the intestine called the villi. Villi are like these little hair-looking things, and nutrients enter the bloodstream through the small intestine. So that's very important, because if your blood doesn't receive the nutrients from the small intestine, then it can't travel throughout your body, throughout the circulatory system, which means your body does not get the nutrients it needs, and you can't really function normally as a human being and do all your daily activities. Final digestion also includes some of the accessory organs I was talking about. So we have the pancreas, the intestinal wall, and the liver. So the pancreas is kind of like this odd shaped thing. It's like near the stomach. The pancreas releases pancreatic juice they release enzymes to digest carbs, fat, and proteins. And in the stomach, they already do this, but since this is final digestion, the pancreas helps break down whatever wasn't already broken down even further. In your intestinal wall, the walls of your small intestine, juices release enzymes to digest carbs, fats, and proteins. So they kind of do the same thing, the pancreas and the intestinal wall. Then you have your liver, which produces something called bile. It emulsifies lipids, and it's not an enzyme. Bile is not an enzyme. Bile is kind of like this greenish substance. It kind of sounds nasty, but it's quite important in final digestion. And the process of emulsification, it's when the bile made in the liver. So bile is made in the liver, but it's stored in the gallbladder, which is probably another organ you've heard of. It's very, very small. It's green in color because of all the bile, and it reduces fats into fat droplets. So it kind of just breaks down the fat even more. Oh, and lipids is basically a fancy word for fat. So the liver and gallbladder really focus on the fats and lipids. So here's just kind of a chart. So the food, so what kind of food you eat. So carbs, you might be eating bread or pasta or something like that. You have proteins, so maybe some kind of beans or chicken, and then fats or lipids, which are fats. You might be eating some junk food or maybe some healthy fats such as peanut butter. And so the enzymes used to break down each of these are listed here. So to break down carbs, you need amylase, sucrase, maltase, and lactase. And just remember, if you see anything that ends in ASE, that's an enzyme that helps break down something. And the nutrients you get from carbs are called monosaccharides, which are the most basic type of sugar. It's also called glucose. To break down proteins, you need trypsin and peptides. And the nutrients you get from proteins are called amino acids. And then for lipids, you need lipase, which the nutrients you get from that is fatty acids and glycerol. So that's kind of a chart to break down everything for you. So this is kind of what happens in your small intestine with the absorption of nutrients. So the digested nutrients pass through your intestinal wall into your blood, as we discussed before. In villi, it's kind of like the little. I think they look like little hairs personally, but they're like finger-like projection in the folded walls of your small intestine, which helps increase the surface area of the small intestine. And the villi is surrounded by things called capillaries and lacteals. And capillaries are something that you can see in the picture. They're kind of like these, kind of look like blood vessels. They're basically blood vessels, capillaries. And it absorbs simple sugars, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals into your blood. So capillaries kind of, um, they're kind of involved directly in the small intestine. This is kind of like the small intestine, it's kind of like the folds of it, and the capillaries run inside of it, and it just kind of transport everything, and that's your main bloodstream. As you can see down here is the vein and the artery. And then you have something called lacteals, which absorbs fatty acids and glycerol into lymphatic system, which is basically your lymph nodes and all of that, and then to your blood. So capillaries are mostly for your sugars, proteins, carbs, vitamins, and minerals, and lacteals are for your fat. So it's kind of an individual thing for just for fat. And this is kind of a picture, so you can see the lacteal is kind of like that green thing, and it's like surrounded by the capillaries, which are the blue things, and yeah, they just work together to bring stuff into the blood. So here's more on the accessory organs to small intestines. So all these kind of help out the small intestines. So we have your liver first, which is your largest internal organ in your upper abdomen. So it's actually larger than the stomach. It's bigger than you think, I would say. I was kind of surprised by the size of it. Liver is actually really important. It has a bunch of functions. So here are some of them. So its first job is carbohydrate metabolism, and it regulates your blood glucose level. So your basically your blood sugar level, and it responds to two hormones, insulin and glucagon. Oh, sorry, glucagon. And basically, the liver is very involved with sugars and carbs. So anyone with either type 1 or type 2 diabetes, either their liver or their body doesn't release enough insulin or releases too much, but that's all to do with the liver. Yeah, insulin is a very important hormone, and your liver is the one that responds to it. Second is protein metabolism, which is the deamination of amino acids into urea, which is basically P. And it also synthesizes clotting proteins and amino acids. So it deals with carbs and proteins directly. Then we have lipid metabolism, which synthesizes lipoproteins, phospholipids, and cholesterol, which are all your kind of fatty things. Of course, there's something called good fats, but it can also be bad fats too. And your liver helps convert the carbs into adipose fat molecules. And if you recall, in our second lesson, we discussed adipose tissue, and that's your fatty tissue. And then fourth is bile composition, which is the yellow-green liquids secreted by hepatic cells, which are basically liver cells. They're made up of bile salt, bile pigment, cholesterol, and electrolytes. And bile salts are actually converted from cholesterol. So if you eat too much cholesterol or like too many fatty things that are really high in fat and cholesterol, your liver's gonna produce a lot of bile, and that's not always a good thing. And bile pigment are converted from broken down red blood cells. So, the digestive system and the circulatory system kind of really work hand in hand for a lot of things. So here are just some pictures. So your gallbladder is the one that stores bile. So you can see it's directly connected to the liver through these like greeny vein looking things, and it's green in color because of the bile. And it's right kind of on top. The gallbladder is very small. It stores all the bile the liver makes. That's the liver right there, and that's the stomach. So the liver is actually above the stomach, and yeah. And then we got the pancreas, which kind of looks like corn on the cob here. It kind of looks like this giant nose looking thing. It's very long. It's kind of like, it looks like a ball shape, and then it's kind of extends out. And it's like a glandular organ near the stomach. It's actually right below the stomach. This is like the beginning of that's the duodenum, which is the beginning of the small intestine. So the gallbladder, sorry, the pancreas actually kind of goes right next to it, and you can see the gallbladder. So it's kind of right in this area here, this kind of whitish area that has nothing in it in the above picture. The pancreas secretes hormones and digestive enzymes. It's really important because it kind of deals with hormones in the digestive system. Next, we have the large intestine, which is a short, wide tube, also known as your colon. You kind of just you can kind of refer to it as either, I'd say, and it runs along the outer regions on your left and right side of the abdomen. So you can see in the picture that's your small intestine, which is mostly in the middle. The large intestine kind of goes up and then across and then down. So mostly your left and right sides, and materials are also pushed through by peristalsis, like in the esophagus and the small intestine. So parts of your large intestine go as follows. There's actually quite a lot of parts. So it goes through your cecum, which is kind of the connecting point between your small and large intestine. So it kind of goes in there. And then you have your ascending colon. So, well, on this person, it's their left, but it's probably your right. And so the ascending colon is the one that goes up. So it connects to the small intestine and then goes right up the ascending colon. And then the one that goes horizontal is your transverse colon. So up, across, and then down your descending colon. So straight down. And then your sigmoid colon is kind of like it's also transverse, like it goes horizontally, but it's a very small segment compared to the transverse colon. So we go up, ascending, horizontal across transverse, and then down through descending, and then a little bit horizontally through sigmoid, and then it goes down to your rectum, where you will defecate whatever cannot be digested out. And then there's something called the ileocecal valve, which controls the passage of material between the small intestine and large intestine. It's basically the valve that separates, it's kind of like the separation point between your small and large intestine, and it's a valve. And then you got your appendix, which you might have heard of. It's very small. It's a small pouch in your lower right side of your abdomen, and it has no known function. I think humans have really, it might have been important maybe like hundreds or thousands of years ago, but today it has no known function. And evolution has really taken its course. And there's actually a similar organ in herbivores, which are animals or things that eat only plants. And it's actually used to digest leafy food. So maybe we once did that too. So it's kind of attached to the ascending colon, and that's your appendix. It's very, very tiny. It kind of looks like a little worm sticking out. And yeah, that's where it's attached. And a lot of people actually have something called appendicitis. That's when your appendix somehow gets infected or swollen, and it kind of collects all this bacteria and like dirty stuff that you don't want in your body. And you must get your appendix out right away, or else, it might burst and all the bacteria will be released in your digestive system. And it's just really bad for your body. It's actually quite common. So if you notice a pain in your stomach, it might be appendicitis, perhaps. So there's 3 functions of the colon or large intestine. So first is reabsorption of water into the body. So if there's too little water reabsorbed, that is going to result in diarrhea, which is, watery stools. So if your colon isn't working properly or something happens and it's not, you know, reabsorbing a lot of water, that's diarrhea. But if they absorb too much water, that's constipation, which is very dry, hard stools. It's also responsible for absorptions of vitamins. So vitamin K is produced by bacteria living in the large intestine naturally, so kind of helps with that. And then third one is it removes undigested material from body. So anything that can't be digested in your stomach, your small intestine, you know, anything left over from all the other parts goes through your colon. And feces is solid waste consisting of undigested and indigestible materials such as cellulose, bacteria, bile, mucus, and worn out cells. So everything kind of left over. That's your feces, and that's the function of your colon. So here's just an overview. I just wanted to let you guys see how everything kind of connects together. So here's a full body kind of thing. So it goes in through the mouth, down your esophagus, very long tube, goes into your stomach, and then into your small intestines, and then out through your rectum. And remember, food only travels through Messer. Everything else is just an accessory organ. So Messer, if you recall, it's your mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and rectum. And you know, all these other things like your liver here, your gallbladder, and your pancreas, and your colon, like everything here, it's just to help. You know, food doesn't actually go through it. I just want you guys to see how many like diseases of the digestive system there are. I think I never really thought there were this many, but after doing some research, you know, it's kind of interesting to kind of interesting to see everything. So you might have heard of ulcers, which is a lesion caused by hydrochloric acid in the mucous membrane of your stomach or duodenum. So either in your small intestine or stomach, it's a lesion. And a lesion is kind of like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a part. It's like a weakness kind of part. It's very painful. If you get stomach ulcers, it's usually super painful, and it requires usually immediate medical attention. And then we have appendicitis, like I discussed before, which is the inflammation of appendix. Actually the only way to really help it is surgery. You need to get it out. You know, you can't really do anything unless you get surgery. Then we got gallstones, which it's basically the hardened collection of cholesterol in your gallbladder duct. So whenever you have too much cholesterol or too much fat of something and it's over a really long period of time, that cholesterol might not be able to be digested, and it actually goes into the duct of your gallbladder, so like a tube in your gallbladder, and it just hardens, and it's kind of like a stone. You know, it's really painful. And if it's small enough, sometimes you can just have some medicine and it can pass through, but sometimes it requires surgery because it just won't budge. Then we have Crohn's disease, which is basically a chronic inflammation of the intestinal wall or digestive tract. So people with Crohn's disease really have to watch what they eat, because anything can kind of set off the inflammation, and it's also very painful. Then we got lactose intolerance, which is very common, which is the inability to produce enough of the enzyme lactase to digest lactose. So people with lactose intolerance can't digest things found in like dairy products, so they can't really eat cheese or ice cream, or you know, or drink milk without, you know, having awful stomach pains and just awful digestive feelings. So that kind of sucks. And then we have celiac disease, which is the damaging of the villi in the small intestine because of sensitivity to gluten. So people with celiac disease really have to watch their glucose level. You know, they can't really have a lot of gluten either, because it just damages the villi, which is really bad because that's what helps your blood absorb all the nutrients. And then we have diverticular disease, which is an inflammation or infection in the pouches in the colon, which is also known as diverticula. Yeah. And then we have gastroesophageal reflux disease. That's also called GERD. It's kind of like acid reflux in a way. Basically, when gastric acid flows from your stomach into the esophagus, and it kind of wears down your esophagus, which is really really bad. You don't want acid in your stomach to get to your esophagus because it just kind of burns it down, and it's very painful, and it's just not good to have acid anywhere else in your body except your stomach. There's also anorexia, which is characterized by intense fear of being fat and severe weight loss. It's also the last two, anorexia and bulimia, are also characterized as mental illnesses, along with physical kind of diseases of the digestive system. And then bulimia is, you overeat, someone overeats, and then they vomit secretly several times a day because they feel like they ate too much, and they kind of eject it all out. And those are just some of the diseases. There's a lot more, but I just kind of wanted to go over some of them. And yeah, that's the end of today's class. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you can email me. And I'll see you next week. And we'll probably be going over the circulatory system. Yeah.